Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, brought to you by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. I'm Brian Perez. Find out more about Biola U at biola.edu. And answering your questions today till 4 p.m. Pacific time on this April 31st. Wait a minute, there's no such thing as April 31st. It must be May 1st. Happy New Month, everybody. Brian Broderson, the co-senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. Bobby Conway from Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. And in the studio joining us once again, the Dean of the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University, the aforementioned Biola University.
Aforementioned.
Ed Stetzer.
Big words. Big words.
Big words, yes. Hi, Ed. Welcome. Have you washed your hands since you met Reggie Jackson?
I wasn't that amazing? Like,
yes.
He just literally comes up and starts talking. But I did. I was a little starstruck.
So you knew it was him right away? Or?
No. So I was at, where was I? It was in Monterey at Shoreline Church. I was preaching. Friend there, Kevin and Sherry Harney, been serving there. They wrote Organic Outreach. So great people, love evangelism, love the gospel. Anyway, so I'm preaching there. A guy comes up after church and says, "Hey," we just shook my hand and said, "Hey, I'm Reggie." Said something nice about my message. And
he didn't say Reggie Jackson.
He did not. So, okay. but the pastor's wife Sherry is standing there. And she says with a little smirk, and I don't know, I have no clue what the smirk's about, because he doesn't. I mean, last time I saw the man was 1977, so like in person. So she says, "Are you gonna tell him your last name?" And she kind of smirks, and he kind of like, "Okay." And I'm Reggie Jackson, and that's not like there are people named Reggie Jackson. Yeah. What are the odds of that actually being that Reggie Jackson? So I said, "So the Reggie Jackson?" And he said yes, and then I had to recover for a minute. I'm like, well, I didn't have any more because my mother threw it away. But I had your baseball card. And he actually said, "You mean like you just sent it in and I signed it?" I said, No. I was at Yankee Stadium in 1977, the old Yankee Stadium where you could get close to the dugout. And I asked you to sign my baseball card, and you signed my baseball card. And he said, "You still have it?" I said, "No, my mother threw it away." Every mom threw away her son's baseball card collection. It's now worth billions of dollars. But what a neat connection, right there after church, and seems like a super great guy. So yeah.
We kind of knew Reggie. He was around here for a while.
I knew that there was some connection with one of his kids to this, to Calvary Chapel as well.
His daughter. Granddaughter.
Yeah.
It was his granddaughter, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So when I saw the picture of him, he looked different though. He still looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looked.
But
young.
he's older. I mean, he's not the Reggie Jackson that you might have seen on television. But I don't even know how old he is. I guess I could look that up. It's probably on Wikipedia.
I want to say he's like 80.
You can't put it on Wikipedia if it's not right. So he's born in 46. So what is that?
So
77.
Yeah, almost 77.
Yeah, 77. So, but what a fun connect. I didn't know he had a Calvary Chapel. Everyone has a Calvary Chapel connection.
Yes.
It's at one point you have gone to Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, if somehow we could have everyone who's ever been to Calvary Chapel show up, it would take the whole city of Santa Ana.
It's true. It's true. Well, I was our Talbot School of Theology is the seminary at Biola University, also the undergrad program. But the head of the Association of Theological Schools, ATS, which is our accrediting body, because seminaries. You can't just make a seminary. I mean, I guess you could, but if you want an accredited seminary that has, kind of the quality you want, it's accredited generally by the Association of Theological Schools. So Frank Yamato is the head of that, Calvary Chapel.
Yeah.
So, and then he went on to be the president of McCormick, which is a seminary in Chicago, and now is the head of ATS. So
you told me when you were with him. Yeah.
So it's like wild. The connections are funny, like how many people. I think the provost at Calvin, Noah, what is his name? Gosh, I can't remember right now. He's actually a Calvary Chapel kid. So, it's kind of wild how significant. One
of the craziest moments I had, I was in London, and I was sitting with Nicky Gumbel, and we were talking, and I had no idea that this had ever occurred. Nicky said, when I was 18 years old, I was attending this conference, and Chuck was here. And he said, me and two friends sat with Chuck for 3 hours, and he just explained the whole Calvary movement to us. And he said it was just fascinating. And I just thought, wow, how do you teach the Bible like verse by verse? That was something that he just couldn't even conceive of.
Fascinating.
But I thought, wow, Nicky Gumbel.
Gumbel. I wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah.
Well, I was. I was just recently emailing Donald Miller, so not the blue like jazz cool guy, but the scholar at USC. I was trying to get him to speak at a thing you're speaking at, and he turned me down.
He turned it down
because he's retired, didn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But if you read his book, Reinventing American Protestantism, and others, I mean, 20 to 30 million people probably trace their spiritual heritage to the Jesus movement, which was so Calvary Chapel centered.
Yeah.
So, like, even for me, so I hear the gospel in the charismatic movement of the Episcopal Church, but the people who, and it was like, it would have been after the peak of the Jesus People movement, it waned by then, late 70s. But the people who shared the gospel with me were kind of, I don't even know, like washed up hippies from the 60s who were now traveling around in a band.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't see myself as a direct spiritual descendant, but maybe a grandchild of that.
Yeah.
So when I became a professor, I was jointly hired to be a professor at Southern Seminary by an agency called the North American Mission Board, Southern Seminary, and then and Saddleback was a partner at the time. And I said to them, I need to do some field work. I need to do some field trips. And I said I needed to go to 5 places. And one of the 5 places, I said, I got to go to Calvary Chapel and talk to them about their church planting strategy, which was very underwhelming when I came. I mean, the church was amazing, but there wasn't anybody to talk to.
There was no strategy.
There was no strategy. So I show up here, and what would that been, like 98? Where would you have been around at that time?
I was in England.
You were in England planning a church.
Yes.
But you and another guy had this church planning Russia thing.
Yeah.
So I looked on the internet. That did exist then.
Yeah.
But I still came. Had a fascinating experience that I think I've told you about, where I came into church on a Wednesday night. And you guys were singing. They were singing when you were in pastor at the time.
I wasn't here.
And I said, "Does anybody have a song sheet or anything? Like the words weren't on the screen." And the person next to me said, "Just the Lord will give you the words." And he actually didn't. So I felt bad about that. But
well, that says something about your.
It does.
Spirituality.
But it was
that Episcopalian thing.
But it was. But it was fascinating. You know that Greg Laurie has the Episcopal connection too, the charismatic Episcopal connection too, back to Riverside.
Well. Yes and no.
No, yes and no. What is it like?
Well, I mean, Greg didn't. He was only connected because that church they were using that
right,
facility.
but that's still a connection. It's that's the charismatic Episcopal movement.
But Greg wasn't an Episcopalian.
I didn't say he was. I said there was a connection to that church.
Greg's a Southern Baptist.
He
like
is.
You.
He is. So,
but he's a Calvary Chapel guy.
Calvary Chapel guy. You can be more than one.
You can.
You are not far from the kingdom.
In some worlds, you can.
You can be friends.
One.
You're allowed to be friends. It depends upon the world that you're allowed to be friends with people or not.
Actually does.
A supercalifragilistic. What am I trying to say here? Southern Calvary Chapel Baptist. There's our new denomination.
Okay.
Well, it's Calvary Chapel. They're Baptist. They're Baptistic. They baptize believers by immersion, following conversion. So I'm going to call you Baptist from now on. I'm a Baptist like Jesus and all the disciples were.
but they weren't Southern Baptists. That's the difference.
You can call us if you have questions about this conversation. The 888-564-61
Middle Eastern
73.
Okay, there's another guy in the room. Look, it's Bobby Conway.
Well, Hi, Bobby. We started. I didn't see him come in. Okay, Bobby. He was out. I don't know. He's getting a smoke or something, but welcome, Bobby. Sorry, not Southern Baptist. You're in North Carolina, so you could be a Southern Baptist.
What's up, you guys?
Oh, we're just having fun.
Yes, indeed.
Haven't been in here with Ed for a while, so
Bobby,
up.
Did you hear about the well-known pastor who said there's no such thing as mental illness and PTSD? Did you hear about all that? I don't know if we want to mention him by name.
I saw a little piece on that. So yeah, but before you do say that, I got to give a contrast story. So Reggie Jackson was my baseball hero as a kid as well, and we actually had season tickets to the A's. And it was just like my moment to get the signature of Reggie Jackson. And I went up to him, and then my pen didn't work. Oh. And he just kind of he didn't really even look up at me, just kind of go get a pen that works or whatever. And it was one of these moments where he
You were
just
crushed.
Now that I'm older, I'm going, he's a big guy, a big personality. He had tons of people waiting. I'm sure he meant nothing by it, but just the pressures that those people have to feel, because my heart was broken. Like, I just was like, oh my goodness,
You
my
were
baseball
telling a terrible
hero
story
was
about
just
Reggie
stern
Jackson.
to me. Yeah, well, I forgive him. I didn't.
Do you need me to get you in touch with him so you can have some healing here? Because we believe
Let's
in
make it
mental health.
Yes.
We believe in
Send me-
mental health.
Send me
here.
your signature, Ed.
Okay.
Yeah, I need you to send me your signature.
Okay. Well, Reggie
need to
was
get a
very.
new
I
one.
was like just a kid. What was it? 77. So I was like 11, and I grew up in New York City, and then just outside New York City, a place called Levittown. But Levittown, if you know the history, has a lot of racial segregation. It was actually had some didn't want black people living there, things of that sort. So I think, in a sense, Reggie was probably the first black hero that I met. And, if you Google back, there were some civil rights issues going on. I think his dad was in the Negro Leagues as well. And so for me, there were just layers to Reggie Jackson being a hero as well. So let's I'm sorry your experience wasn't as great there, but let's take it as a win.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, consider it's a great opportunity about healing trauma and transitioning. I had PTSD. It created some mental health issues, but I've since healed. And now we have a pastor out there saying there's no such thing as mental health issues.
Wow, that was the worst transition back.
Yeah.
It was really bad. It was really bad at so many levels.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate the.
Yeah. You're a pro, brother. That's why I love you.
Thanks.
all joking aside, these are serious. This is serious stuff.
Yeah.
That he has said, because
Are you not going to say the name John MacArthur?
I was waiting for you to do
I was just checking because I'm like I mean, if everyone goes on the internet, they can see it.
Yeah, no,
in
it's
the
fine.
news.
I mean, I've said John MacArthur's name a bunch of times here, but it is actually quite a cruel position to take.
So you should explain what he said so that people understand.
Well, he's just denying that there is anything, mental illness at all. There's no such thing as OCD.
He said PTSD, ADHD, and OCD. That there's no such thing as those things, right?
Yeah, and I think that's cruel.
And I think it's good to watch the full clip, but it doesn't really change much that he doesn't believe. So why is it cruel?
Well, it's cruel because people really do struggle with real issues. And, of course, if you don't even acknowledge that there is a reality to what they're experiencing, that's not helpful in the least. It can actually be quite devastating. And even telling people that, well, look, your problems are just purely spiritual. You need to pray more. You need to read the Bible more. You need to go to church more. You need to serve more, whatever. All of those are great things, but they don't solve your problem. If your problem is physiological, if your problem is biological, if you have a sickness that is in your body, praying is not the solution. Praying is good, and God can heal you, but I think what John is saying is that, this stuff doesn't even really exist, and therefore people just need to grow up and get over it and get on with.
Yeah, I think part of the context is because I watched the whole clip because the short clip I too found really unhelpful. The full context was expressing some concern, which I think we'd all probably share. I'll have Bobby and you guys can share what you share or not, but that we're often an over-medicated society.
Yeah,
true.
That's true.
But the declarative statement, there's no such thing as PTSD. And again, I'm not a counselor. We have a wonderful counseling program at Talbot. We have a marriage and family therapy program. Lots of people who are helping people with trauma that really has a deep impact on their lives, their souls, and counseling is a part of that journey as well. So I think that it is a better thing to say that as followers of Jesus, we want to acknowledge that mental illness is real. And I think most of our listeners have some experience of walking through or know somebody. Mental illness is real. That God's goodness and grace extends through common grace into medicine. At times, we're not anti-medication. I share the concern that we live in an over-medicated culture, but we're not anti. That's somewhere where common grace is at work. But I do think that one of the things that I love about Brian Broderson and all of our churches, I'm sure Bobby does the same thing, is I believe that sermons break stigmas. So when I'm preaching and when you're preaching, when Bobby's preaching, when I'm preaching, for example, be anxious for nothing, Philippians chapter 4, I would also say, and if you find yourself stuck and unable to break out of an anxiety, we want to actually help connect you with a counselor who may help you with that, because the Christian life should be one where we strive to be anxious for nothing. But if there's something broken, we can address that as well, and that's life-giving to people.
Yeah. And after years and years and years of talking to people, you can get a sense fairly quickly that there is something. Sometimes the answer is simply take this passage or these passages of Scripture, meditate on these, trust the Lord, and you're gonna rise above this, or whatever the case is. Sometimes, many times, that is the answer. Let's pray for you. That is the answer. But there are those moments where you realize, no, there's something more going on here, and you need to be sensitive to that. And I learned to be sensitive to that by going through my own battles with depression and anxiety and things like that. So when I lived through it, if somebody wanted to try to tell me that it was imaginary, that it wasn't real, that you just need to trust the Lord, I thought, well, you ought to walk in my shoes for a week or so.
I didn't know. I am this many years old when I learned that you have had issues where you shared with some of the depression and things of that sort. But it's real.
Yeah.
And walking through that.
It's very real.
And I think you have to know the difference between, and I wrote an article about this, not today, but I just posted it today for obvious reasons. And Brian Perez, I sent it to you if you want to put it in our notes. But there's a difference between a spiritual struggle and a mental illness.
Yes.
And I'm sure Bobby's walked people through that. And I'm interested to hear how both of you sort of address that rather than saying the alternative we saw or heard was there's no such thing.
Yeah.
What's a better way to do that?
Yeah.
Bobby?
Yeah. So in our church, you guys, this is such a passion area of ours that we have 3 key distinctives. And one of the distinctives is mental health.
Oh, wow.
So we spend a ton of time trying to incorporate mental health into just the flow of our church. We have a lot of mental health in our own family. So when somebody like that says that, I wouldn't say I feel offended, because I'm not going to let someone like him really bother me. I'm more concerned about what it does to other people, like you're saying. I'm offended at that on a broad scale. I don't personally feel like it's going to mess my day up, but it really bothers me with his influence. And it's kind of like what I've always felt with MacArthur, so much for the grace to you. I don't feel a lot of grace to me when I listen to his ministry. And I don't really even have a problem sharing that, because there's so much stuff that he publicly says that is so harsh and so black and white. And then he creates a posse like that, and they can kind of replicate that tone. And that's just not the gracious kind of tone that we should be after. And it's easy to throw stones and say things. And a lot of people that I consider the most self-righteous people are sometimes the people that just come and they haven't had a lot of the struggles that other people have. And it really makes them poor in the empathy department, poor in the compassion department, but it's all defined in the name of, I'm just holding up the truth. And yes, I know that they would go with nouthetic counseling, which would be using only the Bible. And I think we should first and foremost use the Scriptures. But I don't think we should just put our head in the sand to any other things that thinkers have thought about since Paul the Apostle and the rest of the crew finished writing the Bible. Like, there's no other truths that we can learn about how to live a better life because it's not in the Bible. And I know that he wouldn't go that far, but when it comes to counseling, it can feel that way. And so I do feel like mental health, I've said many times, the church seems to make everything a moral issue. The culture seems to make everything a mental health issue. And discernment makes up for the difference.
That's good.
So, medications is a last resort, and we should be aware of that. So we're doing a course right now where we're teaching through mental health in our church family. But I would say this. So while I think nouthetic counseling's over here, I think that we're living in a time where many of the young Gen Zers, for example, they don't even feel like they fit in unless they have a label. And so everybody's walking around talking about their trauma and needing their safe space. So I do think that there's a lot of dangers to the mental health. And I think the new book by Abigail Shrier called Bad Therapy is a necessary course correction to the whole mental health epidemic that is out there that can help us to be aware of some of the things that we're actually doing to prolong this whole idea. So we need to thicken our skin up a little bit. And some of the things we are calling mental health really isn't mental health. It's just we need to grow up, get disciplined, quit being lazy, get out of bed, roll up our sleeves and go work. And then yet there are times where it's really tough. And I'm saying that as a guy who's a recovering alcoholic. I do struggle with ADD and anxiety at times in my life. And so for someone like that to say that, hey, it must be nice to just feel like you can look at everybody differently, but we need to realize everybody comes from a different journey, and we should be trying to understand that and join them in their journey and not just judge it.
I'm glad you mentioned the influence that John MacArthur has, because, yeah, there are people who hang on every word this man says.
Oh, yeah.
And they might feel the opposite. Like up until today, they felt that, no, PTSD is real. Mental health is a real thing. But as soon as John MacArthur says this, it's like, oh, I guess I'm wrong. John MacArthur's right. John MacArthur's right about everything. So there's that.
And he doesn't mind calling out everybody about everything. And that's where you see me say this a little bit. It's more like, I don't want to just mention, I'm just trying to say what you're saying. It's like, here's a person who's constantly calling everybody out. And I think, why don't, like, just from some orthodoxy to say, you know what, maybe he needs to tone down a little bit because this is toxic to the culture, those types of statements.
Well, my greatest concern is, I think what Brian Perez was just saying, is that there will be people who hear this, who, I've never served in a war. I don't know that John MacArthur's ever served in a war, but soldiers come back, and we've seen, as a pastor, I've sat with people who've served in wartime in battle zones, and they were going through some significant PTSD, or someone whose childhood was just significantly problematic and traumatic. So, yeah, for what it's worth, I think the thing that probably, I don't come on talking about people a lot. I just think it's really important that we recognize that that we need to remove the stigma of mental health struggles in our churches, help people, bring the word of God, bring the community. It says, carry one of those burdens and thus fulfill the law of Christ. Bring the community alongside, recognizing that for most people, it's a spiritual struggle in some way, not a mental illness. The majority of Americans are not at any given time struggling with a mental illness, but there are realities that we do. And what we say at Biola is all truth is God's truth. And so we have the Rosemead School of Psychology, right? And we look through it in a discerning lens. And I'm guessing people are going to have questions about this. We'll have calls about this. Again, our number is 888-564-6173. But we believe all truth is God's truth. But we're going to filter that through the Word of God. And we can acknowledge that we are an over-diagnosed and over-prescribed society, and still recognize that mental health is real and be there. And I love Bobby's wisdom in that was really intense.
I am presently counseling a friend who's going through a season with anxiety. Just came on him out of nowhere. He doesn't know what triggered it, but it's very, very difficult. So having lived through it, having counseled numbers of people on the topic, I've just been encouraging him, look, this is, you're going to be okay. It's going to take a while. It's not going to, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and feel like you did before, but know that you're on this journey. He's doing a light dose of antidepressant, which is helping him. And here's the thing that is, this happens over and over and over again. Christians feel if they take medication for this, they are somehow not trusting God.
Yeah, spiritual.
So then they fall into this cycle of condemnation, and they feel like, well, I can't do that, or I need to get off of this. And I had a really, really dear friend who was basically bipolar, schizophrenic. When he was on his medication, he was amazing, wonderful. But every now and again, he would get this idea that somehow, because he was taking medication, he was not trusting God. So he would occasionally just take himself off his meds. And when he did, it was not good. He would take off all of his clothes and go walking down the center of the main street, stark naked, out of his mind.
Wow.
And, then he would have to be, apprehended, put 72 hours back in the mental institution. And, finally he came to the point of realizing that this medicine is a blessing. God has allowed this medicine to exist so you could have a semi-sane living experience and not go crazy, not take off your clothes, not hurt yourself. And he finally just decided, okay, I'm going to be a medicated person and God still loves me and it has nothing to do with a lack of faith. This is just what God has provided for me to make it through this.
And I think all of us here in Pastor's Perspective Conversation today would say that's a place that's biblical, pastoral, helpful. So if you're struggling with how do you respond on some of these issues, talk to your pastor, it might be a connection to a counselor that's there as well. So that would be our exhortation to you in light of this kind of news and conversations going on today.
What I find funny too is the four of us here on the program right now, we all wear prescription eyeglasses.
Yeah.
So is it a lack of faith to wear eyeglasses because they're prescription? It's kind of like medication.
But this is really the irony. It's just somehow missing the reality that your brain is a physical organ. Your brain can malfunction just like your kidneys can malfunction or your liver can malfunction or anything else. And it's just some people just will not give any room for that. And I think that just doesn't even make sense that you wouldn't acknowledge that there could be something in the brain, in the nervous system, that tweaks and needs to be repaired through medication.
And you gave the example of ADHD what is it, you or Bobby? I think it was Bobby.
Bobby
gave the example of ADHD, which again, we've seen. Like it makes, now again, we're going to say all this. And then, of course, someone could say, well, but people are over-medicated. So we're saying that the answer is not to rush to medication. Even Bobby said last resort.
Yeah.
So don't hear what we're not saying, right? But what we are saying is there's not an absolutist that no, these things don't exist. They do exist. Yeah. They're treatable in some cases. Doesn't mean every person needs to be on medication. Bobby?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the statement that you were talking about, Ed, or Brian, I think it was you, Brian, people not taking medication and stuff because they feel, a sense that they're doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. When I was at Dallas Seminary, the anxiety had just got to a point in my life. It was just so overwhelming and it was crippling. And it wasn't because there was some sin in my life, like people. I just had an exorbitant amount of anxiety, and I had lived that way. Like I can remember probably at about 7th grade, hands palmy, sweaty, feeling anxious, just crawling in my skin, feelings that just didn't seem normal, and it was hard to be present. Well, my counselor on the campus, psychologist, said, I think you've got general anxiety disorder and you should go get on medication. And because of the way I was taught in the church, I thought, well, I would be lacking in faith. And so I would go on for about another 10 years where it then turned to depression because I was just trying to walk by faith. And I was like, well, this is just spiritual warfare. And that's what I'm in the middle of. And I got to fight it out. And that was where I was at. And then I had another counselor later say, look, I really believe some medication can help you. Consider yourself out in the middle of a lake drowning. Medication, it's just going to put a life vest on you so that you can actually feel like you can swim back to shore. Right now, you feel like you can't even hardly grasp any breath. And that's exactly what it ended up doing. It allowed me to be able to have a life vest so I could actually start dealing with some of the life difficulties that had taken the capacity out of my life so that I could actually cope again.
888-564-6173 is the number to call, right, Ed Stetzer?
I did. 888-564-6173.
Just wanted to make sure. Yes. Yeah. We are here on Pastor's Perspective till 4 p.m. Pacific time. We would love to chat with you about this topic or any topic that's on your mind. 888-564-6173. Carrie, where's Carrie? Carrie, we want to go back to you. Please call us back. There she is. Okay, good. She called back. We'll take your call when we come back from the break, and we'd love to chat with all of you as well. 888-564-6173.
Yes.
888-564-6173. Welcome back to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. Biola.edu is where to find out more about Biola University. I'm Brian Perez, and answering your questions today, we've got the Dean of the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University, Ed Stetzer. Brian Broderson, of course, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. And joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina, it's Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, whose new book just came out last week. And he's going to be on your program, right, Ed? Soon?
Are you on our radio program? Yeah, we got you coming up on the radio. That's right. So I don't know when, but he's in the next issue of Outreach Magazine as well. He was asking me when it comes out, and I'm like, I don't really know. I think it's the May-June issue, Bobby, so it should be hitting the streets at any moment. So, matter of fact, I'm going to send a note, but
yes.
You guys, we love Bobby's work. Just ongoing good work, and so that's great. Congratulations. Is your book out today? Is
no,
this last week? Okay, great.
It came out last week. Yeah. So the reason Brian knows is Brian says on the show yesterday, you need to be on Ed's show. And I said, I actually reached out to Ed. So, it looks like he might have me on his program.
Well,
so,
we already know. I've already emailed the producer, who I guess hasn't gotten in touch with you yet, but very, very, very soon you should be on the program. We're excited about it. So
Christianity Still Makes Sense. .com is the website.
Yep. And it's and you can get it ordered on Amazon right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Of course. We'll send you the bill later. No, I'm joking.
Well, and I got to say, Bobby, he didn't experience the earthquake we experienced a few minutes ago. I just thought.
No, he didn't.
Because I guess the majority of our listeners are in Southern California. We had for me, it was a big one. It was they said 4.5, but I think they've brought it down to 4.3. But that's Bobby, first time I'm sitting in my office on a Zoom call, and I'm like, there's an earthquake. And I didn't know what to do. Did you feel it?
I did, yeah.
Did you do anything when you feel it, or you just sit and wait?
I was talking to my son, and he was standing in the doorway. I said, you're standing in the perfect place. You're in the doorway. I'm sitting here at my desk. We're having an earthquake right now. He goes, I know.
That's so
That's
wild.
it.
Because it was Orange County. It was it felt it big Orange County. Yeah. Did you feel it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
But not Bobby Conway. They don't have earthquakes in North Carolina paradise.
They have hurricanes and everything else.
But I've been in all the big ones. I was in a 6.2 in 5th grade. Then I was in Northern California with the World Series.
Oh, wow.
And then I was in Southern California when they had the two back-to-back, like, what was it, 7.2 and then a 7.3.
Wow. I would be crying like a
that
baby.
was in like 93.
I would be hiding under my desk. Because it's not,
Flying
I'm
back
from
to
New
Chicago.
York. We
those
don't
were
have
huge.
earthquakes. You know, it's a whole different thing out here. So anyway.
You have other issues in New York.
Don't talk about New York. You got a son-in-law and a daughter in New York. Don't you say bad things about New York. Planting a church in Manhattan, no less.
I know. I love New York.
All right. New York's the greatest city in the world.
Not all that wild about Columbia University at the.
This is a great
Present
opportunity to mention
moment.
Biola University. Because we're actually having our graduation this week. You know, down in USC, these kids, like they canceled graduation. USC's University of Southern California. It's one of the campuses that kind of gone crazy. They canceled graduation. These are the same kids whose graduation was canceled in their high school.
Yeah.
During COVID.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
It's UCLA though, not USC.
I thought it was USC.
I think it's UCLA.
okay.
Both. They're
Is it
both?
both?
Yeah.
Well, I know all the crazy stuff's going on at the UCLA campus. 'cause
Yeah.
I've
It's a good moment to remember why Christian colleges, it doesn't have to be Biola University, but Christian colleges and universities really make a difference as well. Yes, USC has also canceled their graduation. So, yeah, crazy.
Boy, and you think of these students, and you think of these parents who they pay a lot of money for these kids to go to school, and then all of a sudden it's like everything's off. You know, you
And to
can't-
see them, again, this is where I think people should, I know I'm at Biola University, but people really should think about, do I want to pay money to send my kids to university that's going to turn them against my values, that going to really move them? I mean, there's some great education, right? There's great education. I've spoken at, secular schools, Boston College, I've spoken at Yale, I've spoken at places, but there's also a lot of indoctrination that goes from there. And higher education's in some significant trouble today.
Yeah.
And I do think, and I hope that, and we're for, Christian schools, not just ours as well. But boy, that's been all over the news, and people might want to call and talk about that at 888-564-6173. See how I worked in the number? You make fun of me for working in the number, but
I don't make fun of you. I think it's hilarious. Like I said during the break, that I just think it's
like a radio thing. I don't know.
They're going to, one of these days, you're going to be somewhere and they're going to ask you for your phone number, and you're probably going to say
888-564-6173.
Just like I've almost given out my personal cell phone number.
I've given out my number. Yeah, it was about 3 years ago on my, I have a Saturday radio show, for those you don't know, on this network, and I gave out my phone number, and I made them go back and take it out of there because it was like, so you can't go back and find it in the records. But I can give you Brian Broderson's cell right now. Let me give it to you right now.
Mine's, public knowledge.
714.
Everybody calls me.
It is 714, but I'll stop there.
You better.
You better.
Shut off his mic.
I'll give you
Have your
Charles
finger on the button.
Broderson's.
Hey, I've got your phone number too, so you better watch.
That's true. We can do it right now.
Yeah, I might give
All
it
right, I
up.
like it.
888-564-6173. To Carrie in Virginia we go, listening on Equip FM. Hi there, Carrie. Thanks for calling in today.
Hi, guys. I love listening to you guys. I listen to you guys almost basically every day.
Nice.
Oh, that's great.
My question is, I'm going into education in the special education field, and it's kind of a two-part question. One part is, how do I make sure that even in the public school setting that I have a biblical view of the children that I'm teaching and their mental illnesses and everything that goes with that? The other question I have is all the mental illness and everything that's happening right now, is that always happened, or is it more prevalent? Did it happen because of the fall? Yeah.
Like, why does it seem we're hearing about it more now than ever before? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Bobby Conway, what would you say?
That's actually a really good question. And let's try and think about that together, because it is definitely more prevalent. There's a number of situations that would come to my mind. I think in a world where, people are no longer looking to the church in the way that they once did, there's some people that are looking for other explanations to kind of define things. So even besides just the church, just think of Western values, so to speak, that had shaped our culture and helped build our culture. Well, the church no longer shares the same values as the culture. So that has been a change that we're seeing. And so what's happening is the culture is looking for explanations for the struggles that people have that maybe the church and Western values would provide for. And so it's getting packaged under the umbrella of mental health. But under that umbrella, there's still mental health issues that we are learning to recognize even in the church. So for example, when I was a kid in high school or junior high, I didn't have a language for the anxiety or the ADD that I had. And so there's been a lot of development in the area of neuroscience. And even when kind of I was starting off the Christian life myself, I mean, it was very new, some of the counseling practices that were starting to take on the scene. And so the church recognized that there was a real need to offer counsel, to offer that psychology wasn't bad, but it was confronted with this, and a lot of people rejected it, and a lot of people still do. But then other people went all the way over and just embraced it. And instead of really having a sin problem, now it's just all mental health. And so I think that social media is another reason why you see an increase in mental health issues. Take, for example, the 4,000% increase amongst teenage girls that are struggling with gender dysphoria compared to a time when they used to not have these struggles. Well, the growing list of gender pronouns that are out there, how are they to feel settled in their identity when you're sitting around reading dictionaries explaining the different pronoun that you could take, knowing that the list is growing? So I think that has created a lot of the mental health. Living through COVID obviously was a big, massive contributor. Watching our country be so divided, struggling to wonder if we could be united again. Seeing the dysfunction of the home take place. And the irony in all this is we're rejecting certain biblical values that help build Western civilization, and we don't even realize often that the new values that we're adopting is actually destroying our culture. Because when you overthrow the family and you to say all masculinity is toxic, now you got young men just posing as effeminate because they want to fit in. They don't even feel like they can be masculine in the sense of maybe others understand it because they're toxic. And then you got girls that are just in total crisis. You have polyamory, and people don't even want to get married because they're just denying that they can even be faithful. The porn industry has messed people's mental health up and created impulse controls contributing to this. And then not only that, we're legalizing in a country saying, there's no such thing as sin, yet people are still experiencing the consequences, and they have mental health issues because of the way that they're living. So I think that there is a ton of stuff as it relates to morally, socially, church-wise, legally, politically, that is causing the mental health crisis.
Pastor Brian.
Well, Carrie, did that kind of get near to what you were asking?
Oh yes, it kind of made. I kind of mimic basically everything that he said because I just want to make sure that I'm biblically sound and making sure that I don't get sideswiped by things that are not of God and founded in what God wants to be. Because it's as somebody who is growing up in the age that we're growing up in, it's really hard to make sure that you're actually following with all the different sounds around you, with all everything, because I'm totally different than a lot of people of my age. And I'll be 26 in a month. Okay. So it's so hard to make sure that you are biblically founded.
Yeah, and
especially in going into the education field.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you're struggling yourself a bit with anxiety.
Yeah, I was diagnosed very young with ADHD, and kind of with that came test anxiety and all that stuff.
Yeah. So
and
have you
actually tried to make sure that I don't become dependent on that label, because you were talking about that when I was listening beforehand.
Yeah. So have you been under a doctor's care for that over the years?
Here and there. I've mainly relied on God, and He's been very faithful with that.
Yeah.
I have thought about doing counseling for it, but I haven't seeked it yet.
Yeah.
I'm a very stubborn-natured person, so I'd like to do it by myself, but I know sometimes you can't.
Yeah. Well, good. Okay. Well, good. I think that's great.
Let me weigh in. If you're going to be going to special education, my wife has a master's degree in special education. Bet you didn't know that. So, yep, Donna does. And
Did she get it at Biola University, the
She did
most
not.
comprehensively Christian university in North America?
But thank you for letting us be a sponsor of the program. She went to Buffalo State College, teachers college, which is state school, and I think that's part of where Carrie. She's 26, so if she's going to be doing additional education in that area and field, I would encourage you to connect. That there are wonderful. I don't know if you're going to public school or private school, but there are wonderful Christian teacher, of course, in Christian schools, obviously you're going to find wonderful Christian teachers, but there are wonderful Christian teachers in public school. It is not without challenges. We see that you're from Virginia, so you're going to have, it's a little less challenging in states. California is just challenging right now because you have to deal with these rules that are very driven by more progressive. This is a very progressive liberal state. So I would encourage you to connect with this is a Talbot grad, actually. That's Christian Educators, and it used to be the Christian Educators Association International, and now it's just called Christian Educators. David, the head of that, just sent me a message just recently. But it's basically a group of people for Christians teaching in the public schools, because what you find is the just transparently, the National Education Association, the Teachers Union. My wife was a public school teacher and declined to send her dues to the NEA. It's just very progressive and in ways that we just find really unhelpful, really unhelpful. And so there are different alternatives. And so the Christian Educators one is that I found to be helpful as well. And that's ceai.org, and that's for public school teachers who are Christians to kind of partner together and network together. I got it wrong. It's actually christianeducators.org. That's the new website, christianeducators.org, and that's helpful. So that because I love it, because I want you to be well grounded as you've expressed a desire to do. I want you to be well grounded, and really just thank you for your willingness to serve students with special needs. I think that's great. Donna was severe disabilities is where she worked, and then she actually became a teacher in an area where the kids were actually expelled from other schools, and she was the school of last resort, and she was amazing with those kids. So thank you for doing that, Carrie. That's awesome.
ChristianEducators.org is the website, Carrie.
I've always wanted to do it. Never wanted to do anything else.
Love it. Go for it. Good for her.
Yeah, that's great.
That was a great call. Good for her. Carrie from Virginia.
888-564-6173. Let's come back to California and talk to Angelica in the land of Upland. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Angelica.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Great.
Good.
So I have a question. Obviously, that's why I'm here. Listening to everything you guys have been sharing and everything. At any point, do you guys lead you guys have somebody who comes to you guys and says, I'm dealing with anxiety, or I'm going to go to the doctor, or it's been suggested I do this or that whatsoever. Do you guys ever lead anybody into deliverance where you guys help the person go back, and try to pinpoint the root issue of this anxiety or this trauma or whatever they're suffering with? Do you guys ever lead the person into deliverance?
Bobby Conway, we'll start with you on that.
There's different tiers of counseling. There's lay counseling, there's pastoral counseling, there's professional counseling. I think in a church, certainly what I feel as a pastor is a responsibility that we recognize our limitations. And so I think that when it comes to equipping lay people in a church that's trying to do mental health ministry, what you're doing on a lay level looks a lot different than what a professional counselor is doing, because pretty much everybody thinks they're a shrink in today's world. And everybody's diagnosing each other and talking about labels. And I really think that we have to be cautious in that way. So there are certain things that we can do on a lay level, and you think about Celebrate Recovery. I mean, just the power of a community of people that are sharing their story of experience, strength, and hope of how they made it through a trial or are working through something, that can give hope to somebody. But really, on the lay level, it's sharing your experience, strength, and hope. It's offering up, maybe some books that you've read that you can find helpful. On a pastoral level, you're coming to bear on the scriptures. You are asking a lot of root cause questions. So there is an element of diagnostic. So if I'm working with somebody, I am trying to assess, do I need to pass the baton off to a counselor? So I'm asking questions about how long has this been going on? What triggers it? Tell me about your experience. What kind of problems have you had in your life as a result of this? Does this create relational difficulties? What do other people around you say about this? And I'm listening as I'm asking questions. And then there's biblical advice that I can leave them with, some hope that I can leave them with, and then it's connecting them to a proper biblical counseling center. But I want an integrative one that's not looking at some of the science findings in neuroscience, or it's not leveraging medication as a last resort. So obviously, then when it comes to deliverance, I think that people can find a lot of healing through opening up in just a lay group. Sometimes people find strength from a pastor when the pastor prays. Sometimes people need a counselor to walk with them through an extended journey. So there's not a one size fits all for any type of a person. Have I seen healing? 100%, where I've seen people experience wonderful healing, but it's not maybe deliverance in the way that the charismatic movement would use it, where, all of a sudden you were just like, you're delivered in the name of Jesus from ever having an anxiety disorder again. That would be great, but typically that's not the way it always works, because we end up getting anxious because of a number of causes, and we look at what those causes are, and then we seek to figure out the best way to move forward.
Ed Stetzer just got up from his chair. I think he's ready to preach or something.
No, just more comfortable.
Oh, okay.
Bring it.
Just more comfortable. I do think. I agree with everything that Bobby said. I think her specific question, though, was we should talk about root issue. And so what I would say is that, and this is Angelica, is that generally the root issue isn't a deliverance-related issue in most cases or situations. But I do think that, if I understand what she's asking, that, even Brian, you were talking about that the person took some mild medication while you were helping them, in a sense, deal with the root issue. So, yes, we definitely want to deal with the root issue. And if the root issue is somehow related to spiritual oppression, we want to deal with that as well. And so I think all of us here have had encounters and dealt with things related to deliverance. So I guess I think my answer to Angelica's question is yes, we want to deal with the root issue, and occasionally the root issue is related to some related issue of oppression or that requires deliverance. But more often than not, it's more the path that Bobby sort of described.
Pastor Brian? Yeah,
I would just say this just for a little bit of clarification. I think, we live in a therapeutic culture. We live in a highly psychologized culture. And thus the increase in mental illness. This is a diagnosis coming from from that world. They're saying, everybody's got these mental disorders. And, people are screwed up. There's no question about that. And all the things that Bobby talked about earlier and all the things that we know going on in the culture, they lend to mental instability and things like that. But what I want to say, and I think this is important, that as believers, as people who know the Lord, trust the Lord, we do believe that most of life's issues can be solved simply through knowing God, knowing His Word, applying the Scripture to our lives, being prayed for, being in community, like Bobby mentioned. But we also acknowledge that there are cases where you're going to need to take another step. You're going to need, and I think we began this whole program today talking about John MacArthur's statements. And what John is saying is very unhelpful, not because everybody is mentally ill, but because some people genuinely are. And the mentally ill people need to know that there's help for them. Mm-hmm. So, I've been talking with people for 40 years in pastoral ministry. Most people I have been able to help them through just taking them through Scripture, praying for them, spending time with them. But occasionally I recognize, even in the course of my dealings with them, like, there's something beyond, there's something a little bit deeper here that we need to. And then I will recommend them to sometimes a doctor, just go to your MD, get your blood drawn, see what's going on in your body, and then perhaps also to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, depending on the situation. So I think the idea that Christians are somehow, like we said earlier, that they're lacking in faith, they're not trusting God, that's a stigma that we've got to get away from and acknowledge that, yes, there are times and places where additional help is needed. And thank God there are godly people. And, I've known plenty of people that have gone to people in the professional world of counseling and so forth that haven't even been Christians, but they've actually helped people through, different application of things. And yeah.
Yep. Bobby Conway.
So,
yeah, this is where, I feel for people trying to just work through the waters of the different denominational opinions that are out there. And I know that, I just another voice in the matter. But at the end of the day, you do think like, okay, you got certain branches of Christianity that would say you just got to have faith, right? So like to your point, Brian Perez, we can put on our glasses. Like imagine going to an optometrist, looking at the lines, and then you're trying really hard to read it. You can't read it. And then the doctor says, well, go home, pray and fast, and then come back. And you come back and you're like, oh, I can't quite make that out. What, you don't have enough faith. I need you to go home, pray, read your, well, no, what does he do? He's like, okay, we can make some adjustments, fine tune some things. We can give you a prescription and you can now see. And it's like, we don't mind if somebody's got high blood pressure, giving them a heart medicine. Well, the brain is an organ. Right? And so it's like, why can we have medication for our heart? Why can we have medication for our bladder? Why can we have why can we wear prescription glasses? But then if our brain is kind of, tweaked a little bit and it's not, working the best, we're like, now you need to pray more. Now you just need to have faith. Or you just need to read the Bible. That's the only thing you can do. Well, I look at it like this. Life is going to bring us enough problems as is. It's going to be really difficult. And if there is a way that we can find some help and through medication, and again, if that's a last resort, we don't need to become, have a martyr complex and just make our life more difficult and grit things out. There's going to be plenty of trials along the way. And if we have irrational fears and we don't know how to explain it, well, it might not be sin. It just might be that, we've got something deeper going on. So I think today's program was valuable. Thanks for leading us this direction.
Yes, it definitely was. And it'll be archived on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts a little bit later so that you can listen to it or watch it or share it with your friends as well. Thank you so much for listening and thank you for watching. Thank you for calling in. Sorry that we couldn't get to all of your questions, but we will be here tomorrow between 3 and 4 p.m. Pacific time. For Brian Broderson, Bobby Conway, and Ed Stetzer, I'm Brian Perez coming to you from the studios of K-Wave on MacArthur Boulevard in Orange County. And Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America.
Was that John MacArthur?